go. As Becky said, I'm the director of test prep and tutoring curriculum here at Private Prep. So I work on a lot of different sides of things, supporting tutors and working with my own students. And so a lot of what we're going to discuss today are things affecting current juniors and seniors, especially SATs, ACTs, AP exams, subject tests, things like that. So thank you so much for joining. If you have any questions as we're going, feel free to put them in the chat or unmute yourself and interrupt me. But we'll also save a couple minutes at the end to do some Q&A. But I do have a bunch of answers prepared to the questions that people sent on the sign up form, so I'll be addressing those. So right now, obviously, is a crazy time for everybody, but we are doing our best to make sure that students have as much information and feel as supported as possible in what they're doing for test prep. We also will talk a little bit today about things related to college admissions. Test prep and college admissions are so intertwined that there's really no way to pull them apart completely. But I do want to share that we had another webinar yesterday with Rachel, our director of college admissions, that will shortly be uploaded to a website. So if you have any more college admission specific things, applications, recommendation letters, things like that, you can go back. Rachel is the expert there. So I'm going to be talking more so about the test prep side, but I will do my best to answer any questions that come up. Okay, so I'm just going to dive in here. So got some questions about opportunities for the SAT and ACT. So anybody who is a parent of a junior right now is probably very aware of the fact that we had some cancellations. Some places in March for the SAT, and then all April ACTs and all May SATs have been canceled. So the next opportunities coming up for SAT and ACT are going to be in June. As of now, those are still scheduled. Really crossing our fingers that those go on. I think if the June tests happen, then there's certainly been a disruption with these spring tests, but I think students are going to be in a pretty good place to be able to plan to take those June tests. So the ACT is on June 13th and the SAT is on June 6th. And then there also are other upcoming tests that are going to work great for our students who are current juniors who are going to be working on college applications next fall. So the ACT has a test in July 18th. One thing to note is that if you're in New York State does not offer the ACT in July, although I know students do sometimes travel and take it in Connecticut or New Jersey or other places. So opportunities there. And then the ACT is also going to be offered in September and October. Keep in mind that those registrations open not until July typically. So, but those will be test options for current juniors to take tests in the fall. And then the SAT also has test dates coming up in August. So the end of August, the 29th, and then in October, and even in early November. And people generally in previous years shy away from that November SAT test date, but I think this year is going to be a different year. I think we are likely to see some dates getting pushed back or more flexible time from colleges. So lots of opportunities. And I think it's also fairly likely that we're going to see some extra tests added. I always like to think about the fact that SAT and ACT had some tests canceled and they want to get students in. They want to have them take those tests. So we haven't heard any definitive word yet, but it is very likely that College Board is going to add SATs and ACT will add ACT test dates. So that leads me into another question we got about knowing when those dates will be set. Will there be other ACTs? Will there be other SATs? So one thing I want to share is that College Board has put out some language on their website that they will provide future additional SAT testing opportunities for students as soon as possible in place of canceled administration. So that wording makes me pretty confident that they are going to be adding additional test dates, likely in the summer and fall. Again, they know there are going to be a lot of students that want to get in to take these tests that would have been signed up for the canceled ones. No word specifically from ACT, but historically the two are rivals and competitors. So if SAT adds test dates, I think it's very likely that the ACT will also add test dates. So we'll be on the lookout for that. I think will probably depend also on whether or not the June administrations go on. But I think either way, they're likely to add test dates. Awesome. Okay, so I will talk a little bit also about subject tests and AP exams today. Also top of mind for current juniors and then other high school students as well. So I got a question about test formats. So just wanted to clarify here, SAT subject tests don't have any changes to their format. If the June SATs happen, then the SAT subject tests will happen. They will be in the same format that they are always. But there have been some pretty significant changes announced to AP exams that I want to talk about. So probably you're familiar with AP exams. They're generally taken in May at the end of a school year when a student has been in the AP course at school. And they are usually between 2 and 3 hour tests that students take at school. However, because of the uncertainty about when different students will be going back to school, the ACT or the AP tests are actually going to take place at home this year. And they will be 45-minute tests, so significantly shorter than in previous years. So students will take them at home, and they also will be free response questions only, so essays, short answer questions, as opposed to multiple choice. So there will be no multiple choice on this year's AP exams. We're still waiting for some more information about exactly what that's going to look like, but we do know that there'll be online exams that students will be able to take on a computer, on a smartphone, on a tablet. And they did mention that there will be options for students to submit handwritten work. So there should be very accessible for students. College Board also announced that there will be 2 test dates for AP exams, one in May and one later. We're not sure yet whether those May exams will be the same test dates as they were scheduled for. I think it's pretty likely. And then the later tests probably will be maybe in the month of June, but the exact dates are going to be announced on April 3rd by the College Board. And some information is trickling out about what students can do to prepare, how College Board is offering resources and support there. One last thing to note about AP exams is that they will only be testing information that students are usually learning through early March. So there's, for each AP test, there's a list of units online of maybe if a test has 9 units, typically students will only be tested on 6 of them and they won't be tested on the last 3. So that's something that students can look into. And I just wanted to add here that I'm mentioning a lot of different things. I'm talking about SAT and AP and College Board here. After today's webinar, we will be sending a list of documents and links to all of websites that give this information. So don't feel like you need to furiously take notes here on this. I'll give you some links to those AP exam updates and test dates for SATs and ACTs and all of that. So for students to prepare, I think this is something that's probably top of mind now. Students should definitely be starting to think about what is going to be tested on their AP exam. So looking at, these are the units that I need to study, these are the topics, these are the ones that I don't need to worry about. And we're actually pretty lucky that the free response questions are what the AP exam is keeping this year, because there is actually a wealth of information for students on the College Board website. The College Board always posts previous year's free response question prompts, so students can look back at previous years and see what was tested. And they also include testing guidelines. They'll have scoring and sample responses, so students can start practicing those, looking at what would have been tested, how they would have scored on those in previous years. So lots of good opportunities there for students who are starting to think about upcoming AP exams. Which leads me into another great question that came in, which was, should students take these AP exams at all? So short answer is yes, we do think these AP exams are worth taking. So because if the student was taking the AP class at school, they would have planned to take the exam at school. Since the test will still be available, we'd say go for it. You know, students have been preparing throughout the year. They have learned everything in school that's going to be tested. So they should have a good shot at these AP exams. And colleges have said as well that they will be accepting these AP exams. Colleges are going to be pretty understanding of these changes that are happening. Students are not in control of them. So we think that these are a good opportunity for students. And then secondly, in a year when when other tests are not happening, things are being canceled, it's harder for students to take as many ACTs and SATs and subject tests. These AP exam scores could be an opportunity to show students' strengths in certain subjects. So we want them to be able to say, I can submit this AP credit, whereas in a previous year, maybe they would have worried more about getting a subject test score. we think having these AP exams that we know will be happening is a really good opportunity for students. And colleges will be honoring the credits for those exams or allowing students to accelerate and skip certain classes because of those scores. Anybody want to jump in with questions about AP exams, anything that I've talked about so far? Okay, great. So I'll continue. That leads us then into SAT subject tests. So sort of our fourth branch here of ACT, SAT, AP exams, and SAT subject tests. So we got the question about whether students will be able to balance taking the SAT and subject tests in a tight time frame. So this is a little bit of a tough one, and I think there's some uncertainty here because of the questions around the June SAT dates going forward. Again, crossing our fingers that those happen, but I think we'll be waiting to hear. So if the June SAT happens, I think students are going to have really good options for taking the different tests. So we still have June, August, October, and November for SAT test dates when students could take an SAT or a subject test. If the SAT adds test dates, there will be even more opportunities. I think the general guidance here, though, is that the SAT should still be the priority. So if a student was waiting and planning to take the SAT in May, or theirs got canceled in March, and they still need an SAT score at all, or one that they're happy to send to colleges, they should focus on the SAT. That's certainly going to still be the more important piece of this. But actually having those fall test dates for subject tests is a really good opportunity. So oftentimes students take SAT subject tests in June at the end of a course, but they also can take some time over the summer to study and prepare and take that August SAT subject test date or October or November. They have a lot of options there. If a student has already taken the SAT once or a few times and has a score that they're happy with, they certainly should think about taking the subject test that they were originally planning on. Again, either in June if it happens, if the SAT adds test dates, or even later in the year, in the fall. So lots of opportunities there. Another question here, whether colleges are going to be viewing the SAT differently. I think this is a very timely question. I think it's something that a lot of people are thinking about here. And also wondering whether students can submit the only score they have if they haven't had an opportunity to take it multiple times. We are definitely going to see a shift in expectations from colleges. There's definitely a lot still in the works. Colleges are very focused right now on the current seniors who are going to be coming in the fall and trying to make plans for them to figure out where they want to go, acceptances. But we're still waiting to hear a lot more about juniors with some information trickling in. Again, a lot of this is probably going to depend on the school and likely will depend on whether the June test dates actually happen. We are seeing some schools moving towards test optional admissions for the fall. A couple notable examples are Case Western Reserve, Tufts, and Boston University are offering test optional in the fall. And then we're also getting some information about schools that are changing subject test requirements or that are going to be more flexible with them. So MIT is an example of one that is completely getting rid of subject tests. They're not going to be considering them. They're not going to be looking at them at all. Harvard has just said that they're going to be more flexible and understanding if the student can't take subject tests. So we expect to see more changes as the spring goes on. There's a lot of news happening very quickly right now. And we actually have a running list on our website. So if you're on the website and you're looking at the coronavirus updates page, we'll be keeping a list of schools there that are giving us information about their testing policies. But ultimately, even if students do have to submit testing for a school, admissions offices are expressing that they're going to be more understanding of the fact that students may have only had one opportunity to take the test. Maybe they're not taking it multiple times to improve their scores like they would have. So we anticipate that colleges are going to be more lenient with the testing and probably going to be de-emphasizing testing to some degree. But since we don't have a lot of clarity on this, we're really still advising students to stay the course and keep preparing. Like we've gone through, there are still multiple options for these tests. So students who can are likely better off to continue taking a June test, taking a summer test, taking a fall test, just because there's also likely not going to be consistency across schools. And students might be applying to one school that went test optional, but they also might be applying to a school that still wants to see and is pretty heavily considering SAT and ACT scores and subject tests. And I think in general, really good question here about how this is going to, how our pandemic now is going to impact college admissions for the class of 2021. Sadly, the big answer is we don't know yet, but I think we'll have a lot more information as we go on. But I think some potential effects are going to be more changes to test optional admissions for the fall. I think that's something that we have started to see from schools, and it's likely a trend that's going to continue. However, test optional means that some students are submitting test scores and some students are not. So there's certainly no harm in students who have the opportunities and who have the resources to keep testing to do so. We also think there's going to be an increased importance of things like recommendations and essays. That's something that whether or not students could take those extra tests, they could be thinking about. We also think colleges are probably going to reevaluate and how they consider demonstrated interest. So we know that many students had spring break plans to visit colleges this year, and campuses are closed, and potentially until the fall semester at the earliest. So I think there are going to be different ways for students to probably interact with colleges, show that they're interested, and find information. So there are a lot of great resources out there. I know that we at Private Prep are going to be working to have current students share their experiences, or former students share with current students their experiences at the colleges they're at, to give students a sense of where they're interested in going, maybe even get some more realistic answers than they would on a tour. But we know that that's something that colleges are not going to be expecting these current juniors to be visiting and showing that demonstrated interest. And there's also probably going to be a decrease in international student enrollment, which may be something that opens up more spots for domestic students. So we may see some shifts in the types of students that colleges are looking at, the proportions that are being accepted from different groups. So these are all things that are trends that are likely to happen, but that we will be following closely as we get more information going ahead. Awesome. So that's the end of the questions that were submitted. Does anybody have other questions they would like to ask? Anything from testing to what students should be thinking about right now, whatever you got.
Emily, I have a question. This is Becky.
Sure.
If students are at home and have extra time, I know some students have lots of work, some don't. What do you recommend them working on, looking at, freshening up on? Like, is there any extra work you would recommend, or that Private Prep recommends that they work on it if they have free time?
Sure. Yeah, that's a great question. And I think that hits on an important thing that's happening right now, that there's a really broad range for students of, I know some of my students didn't have any work for the last couple of weeks. We're waiting to see what their work will look like. So some of them are very bored. And other students have already been working on remote learning, and it's a lot. They're trying to do the same amount of learning, but without as much instruction or as many people that they can go to ask questions. So I think the first thing is we want to make sure that students are focusing on their academics as much as possible. It's going to be different for every student. It's going to be different for where they are. But if a student is really stressed about their schoolwork should be first priority. And that's really always the case here. So we want to make sure that students are trying their best to balance that. But if students do have some extra time, now's not a bad time to be thinking about the skills that they're using to do well on the test, whether it's SAT and ACT or AP exams or upcoming subject tests. So I think AP exams, first of all, even though they're not covering the last few units for most of the subjects, they're still covering a lot of ground and a lot of information. So now would be a really good time for students to start going back, looking in their books, looking in their resources, and just brushing up on the things that they learned at the beginning of the year that probably are not fresh in their mind at the moment. And we also have some resources that are going to be going on to a web page that we'll share with you after, that are some quick tips for students to start studying for APs. So those will be kind of like a couple key pieces of information that if a student was working with a tutor, the tutor would give them some overall guidance. So there are a bunch of subjects there that we're excited to share with students. We also are going to be offering AP prep classes in the month of April to get students that want to work in small groups with a tutor. Lots of options there, or students can be doing individual prep work. Whatever they're doing is going to be helpful for them to start thinking about AP tests, because I know every day feels a little bit long right now. It does for me, but I think things are going to start to speed up with the rest of their school year. And by the time those tests come around in May, there's a lot of work that they can be doing over the next month. For SAT subject tests, same thing is true. We're hoping that the tests are going to go forward in June. SAT subject tests are keeping their current form, and they're hour-long multiple choice tests. So just generally, they offer a lot of information that students need to be learning, they need to be studying. There are subjects where we really recommend that students are starting sets of flashcards and reviewing. So that's something that students can be taking this time if they have a little bit less schoolwork to keep their mind fresh. You know, I'm telling my students that I don't want them to be just sitting and watching Netflix. They need to be exercising their brain, whether that's reading or studying. And for SAT and ACT as well, now's a good time for students, if they're a little bit less busy, to keep that consistency, take some practice tests. And whether or not they're just specifically working on ACT or SAT with a tutor or on their own, they can still be building skills like reading comprehension or going back over a math that they've learned this year. So I think there are a lot of opportunities for kids. And if they're trying to balance it with schoolwork, you know, they still have that time at home. It's a little bit tougher, but I think everybody's going to work on finding that balance for their students. Another question I want to answer here are the chances that tests are going to be administered only online. So this is actually a really interesting one. So we do know for sure that AP exams are going to be offered only online. So that is a shift for students. So I think there's some work that students can do independently or with a tutor or in a study group or whatever form it takes to prepare for the fact that they are going from an AP exam that they thought was going to be written and taken in school to a test that's going to be taken online. We're still waiting for some more information about how students can actually like submit their information. So I think the AP language and composition is going to maybe look a little bit different than AP chemistry, where there's a lot of math and writing. But either way, those are going to be offered online. Students should be thinking about how they can transfer their essay writing skills for AP Lang to essay typing skills, and how that's going to look different, and how they can be practicing those free response questions like that. Subject tests and SATs, as far as we know, are going to keep their current format. So those are still handwritten multiple choice tests. And the SAT has an optional essay, but still handwritten. The ACT, I think there's a little bit more up in the air. If this is not something that's familiar, the ACT is planning on starting to offer an online option at test centers in the fall. So starting in September. I haven't heard anything about them pushing that forward and doing it sooner. I imagine it's something that the ACT is thinking about and exploring now. But it is something that if that starts to happen a little bit faster, students can start thinking about prepping for the ACT online version. That's something that Private Prep is working on, how we're going to support our students with. We're going to be offering online ACT practice tests. So that's in the works now, which is exciting. So as far as I know, the timeline is still September for that, but I think anything could happen. It's a crazy time. So lots of things for students to be thinking about, I think, but the most pressing one is AP exams, knowing that those are going to take a different format for them this year. Any other questions? Great. Okay. So I just wanted to thank everybody very much for joining us. Again, we're going to be sending out a list of links and information to the things that I spoke about today. So feel free to take a peek at those. And again, there's going to be a recorded webinar from yesterday's college admissions webinar that gets a little bit more into things about like writing essays for students who are going to be seniors in the fall, recommendations. So if you're looking for some more information about that, that will be an available resource. But most importantly, stay safe, stay healthy. And for students, you parents of students who are probably trying to figure out whether you should be pushing them to do more or letting them sit back a little bit, I think, most importantly is just realizing that this experience is really different for everybody. And I think that's especially true for our students. They're losing a lot of social interaction in school. They're hearing from their friends who are seniors about potentially having to skip graduations and things like that. I think it's a stressful time. So whatever that we can do to help you support your students with all of these things going on, just passing along the message that they're all going to get into college. They're all going to be fine. Colleges are understanding. So if you need any support, please reach out. We're here to help students with test prep, with college admissions, but we mostly just want them to be taking care of themselves physically, mental health, and then knowing that all of these things are going to work themselves out.
Awesome. Thank you, Emily.
Thanks everyone for joining. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.